For more on our latest poll and how Americans are reacting to the Trump economic agenda, we're joined now by our Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, President Trump put tariffs at the center of his campaign. Now he's enacting them. Is there support for what he's doing?
Like a lot of the way people look at investments, it depends on what you see as your goals and your time horizon, by which I mean, in the immediate, we see 3/4 of Americans think that tariffs will raise prices, at least in the short term, and a lot think in the long term, too. Now, they're sensitive to that because, as we've discussed for many years, inflation and prices are top concerns, right? The second thing we see is an increase in the number of people who think that Donald Trump's policies now are making them financially worse off. And it's not just that movement, but it's the setup against expectations. Back at the start of his term a few months ago, a lot of people thought that his policies would make them financially better off. So that's a big change. But now let me talk about the time horizon, because this applies to his political base, to Republicans, many of whom say, hold on a second, you can't evaluate this right now. You have to give it 6 months. You have to give it a year to see how his tariff and trade policies are going to play out. So with that, they're much more supportive of tariffs and of his approach. They also think that he is just using this as a negotiating tactic. Most of them think that he's going to ultimately remove those tariffs, maybe when he gets what he wants. And so that's why you still see a lot of Republican support for all of this.
Well, the White House had said it's not up for negotiation, but then the President Trump said there is a negotiation, and that's where there's some of the confusion right now. But you did indicate the approval rating itself is under pressure. Where is that pressure centered? So
more people say that they like his goals with trade and tariff policies than his approach. And that approach part is weighing on his ratings for handling the economy, which are down, his ratings for handling inflation, tied to what I described about prices, which are also down. But look, the market in the public mind is not the economy.
It's not. The stock market isn't.
Right.
But it's a pricing mechanism of the future of
exactly. And it is an indicator, especially for people who say they have money not just in the market, but that their finances are sensitive to what happens in the market. They're much less approving of his approach right now. But having said that, consider also jobs. The public is mixed on whether Trump's approach is going to lead to more manufacturing jobs. Republicans think it will, but again, that's kind of a long-term issue. Back to the politics for a second. You know, people often ask, when does a president own the economy? And right now, this looks like Donald Trump's economy. A majority of people say it's his policies that are responsible, either way, good or bad, for how it is, not Joe Biden's. And that, of course, sets things up going forward.
Anthony Salvanto, great insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation. Stay with us. We go now to California Democratic Congressman Khanna, who joins us this morning from another state, Ohio. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Good morning, Margaret.
I want to get to what's happening to Silicon Valley in just a moment on the trade and tech front. But first off, I want to ask you, since you sit on the Armed Services Committee, for any insight you might have on one of the announcements made late on Friday. The president authorized the U.S. military to take over a large swath of public land along the southern border, including in the state of California. And I understand that that means the Pentagon's budget can now be used for things like border security or potentially to even detain migrants in that area. Has Congress been briefed on these plans? Do you have any sense of what's happening?
We have not. And Margaret, it's longstanding law that you can't use the military for domestic enforcement. It's a violation of the Constitution. I'm hopeful the Supreme Court would 9-0 rule that way, just like they've ruled that the deportation of Abrego was unconstitutional. But we have not heard any specifics of it, and it's blatantly against the law.
You there were talking about Maryland resident Abrego Garcia, who was detained and then sent to a prison in El Salvador. The Supreme Court said that the Trump administration actually has to facilitate getting him back, but they didn't actually rule on whether he was a gang member or not. I mean, the Justice Department can't substantiate it. But why did you bring up that specific case as proof of something?
Well, it just shows that this administration is taking actions that are unconstitutional. Look, Vice President Vance said that the Abrego was an M13 gang member with no legal rights here, and the Supreme Court said, well, we don't know, and he does actually have legal rights. And so similarly, you now have an administration that is using the military for domestic enforcement, which is illegal, and I believe that even this Supreme Court, a conservative Supreme Court, would rule it's unconstitutional.
On Garcia, ICE said it was an administrative error that led to this man's arrest in the first place. It seems the Trump administration is saying it's now in the hands of the president of El Salvador, who will be at the White House this week. So we will watch for developments on that space. But going back to the line of questioning here regarding armed services, we understand that the president sent his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to talk to Iranian officials over this past weekend. We don't know much other than they're going to meet again. But in the meantime, the U.S. military has positioned as many as 6 B-2 bombers in the Indian Ocean. That's the kind of aircraft that would carry a weapon that could be used to take out underground facilities for a nuclear program. Do you believe President Trump would need congressional approval to carry out a strike, even if it was just in support of Israel leading that attack on Iran?
Absolutely, and almost a third of our B-2 bombers are there. Look, it's unconstitutional what they're doing in Yemen. I said it was unconstitutional when Biden made those strikes. They need to come to Congress. And look, the president was elected by the American people saying we don't want our tax dollars going for more bombing in the Middle East, for more wars in the Middle East. I think he's ignoring the base that actually elected him that does not want more of these strikes. In the case of Yemen, the Saudis had war there for almost 10 years, and it didn't do anything to address the situation with the Houthis. The president campaigned on diplomacy. He hasn't done that, and what we're seeing is escalation.
Well, we'll see what the diplomacy he's attempting achieves in the near term. But let me ask you why you're out in Ohio talking to us this morning. I understand in the coming days you're also going to go to Connecticut to Yale Law on Tuesday. Are you trying to sort of troll Vice President Vance? And if so, why?
Well, no. I mean, Cleveland City Club invited me to give a speech on the economy. And let's talk about these tariffs. I mean, they were chaotic and they were totally haphazard. So you had Howard Lutnick on saying that we were going to bring manufacturing back, electronics manufacturing back to the United States. And they realized suddenly that that wasn't going to happen. Actually, the iPhone price would go up to $1,700 or $2,000. And by the way, if that manufacturing moved, it would probably move to Malaysia or Vietnam. So they suddenly reverse, they exempt all of electronics manufacturing, which is about a third of our trade deficit. And I'm here at the Cleveland City Club to say, if you want to have electronics manufacturing here, the way to do it is not blanket tariffs. You have to create an electronic manufacturing hub, the kind we did with the CHIPS Act. That means investing in tool engineering and workforce. It means having investment tax credits. It means having government buy things from the United States. The president has no plan of how to actually have high-end advanced manufacturing in the United States.
Well, the district you represent includes Silicon Valley, so you must be hearing from some of these CEOs. Who are they lobbying, apparently successfully, to get these carve-outs?
I think they're talking about sound economic policy. I mean, it really would have been, they're talking to anyone they can. At the White House, they're talking to anyone they can who has the president's ear. But what they're saying is pretty simple. First, they're saying that Howard Lutnick, the screws and the screwing only is about 0.1% of an iPhone's cost. I mean, you need to, the actual components are memory, or camera, or RAM. I mean, it's like, I understand they have 19th century policies of McKinley, but they need to have a 21st century understanding of the economy. And then they're saying, okay, you really want to do this? The iPhone will cost $1,600 to $1,700, but we're not going to be able to bring it back to the United States. We'll go to India, we'll go to Malaysia, we'll go to Vietnam. And if you want to bring back the manufacturing to the United States, you have to invest in the workforce, you have to have some investment tax credit for the facilities, and you have to be able to buy the things we make in the United States. So all I'm saying is let's have sound economic policy. And I saw the poll earlier. Yeah. This is not a hypothetical. This is not something the president will be able to spin. Either we're going to see new factories come or we're not. And tariffs just aren't going to do that.
Well, we didn't get a clear answer on when these semiconductor tariffs are coming, but the administration argues they're in the pipeline and that, you know, China's not going to get a free pass when it comes to tech. What is that going to mean for your part of the country?
Well, it's, again, they don't have any sense of when the tariff will come, when it won't come, and they're against the CHIPS Act. So how are you going to, let's say you suddenly put tariffs on China. What it would mean is the production would move to other parts of Asia. Mm-hmm. It still isn't going to come here unless you're financing those factories here, willing to buy here. Tariffs can be a tool used as a broader Hamiltonian industrial policy. And that's what I'm hearing Ohio to talk about, which is what is actually going to bring advanced manufacturing to this country.
All right, Congressman Khanna, we'll be watching. We'll be right back. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy claimed last week that the measles outbreak may be plateauing. But the highly contagious virus continues to spread mostly in unvaccinated people. And the CDC reports that the number of cases topped 700 in 2025 so far. The measles virus, which was once effectively eradicated here in America thanks to widespread vaccination, is now in 24 states. We spoke Friday with Dr. Peter Marks, the former head of the Food and Drug Administration's vaccine program, who was forced to resign last month as part of Kennedy's redesign of American health policy. Our conversation began on the subject of the measles outbreak and the response by the Trump administration. Secretary Kennedy spoke to my colleague, Dr. John LaPook, earlier this week following the death of a second unvaccinated child in Texas due to measles. Kennedy reiterated people should get the MMR vaccine. Take a listen.
What's the position philosophically of the federal government in terms of public health?
The federal government's position, my position is people should get the measles vaccine, but the government should not be mandating.
Understand.
You know, but I've always said during my campaign and every public statement I've made, I'm not going to take people's vaccines away from them. Right. What I'm going to do is make sure that we have good science so that people can make an informed choice.
Is that a sufficient endorsement?
As a public health professional, I'm going to tell you what an endorsement of the measles vaccine sounds like right now. If you can hear my voice right now and you have a child that is unvaccinated against measles, we have measles spreading in this country very significantly. You wouldn't put your child in a back seat of a car without being strapped into their car seat. You want to get your child vaccinated against measles so that they don't have a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying from measles if they contract it. There's no reason to put your child at that risk because the vaccine does not cause death. It does not cause encephalitis, and it does not cause autism. So that's what an endorsement sounds like. Just make the comparison.
That has to be extremely frustrating for you as someone who worked in the vaccine space for so long. You clearly feel that this is safe and effective and that not saying it clearly is endangering people.
Right.
Am
so
I understanding?
Another way, yes. No, exactly. But there's a whole host of people who can't speak out like I am that are saying, you know, this is a vaccine for which the benefits so greatly outweigh the risks that to not use it is the equivalent of, again, throwing, I mean, if you saw a child, if you saw a 15-month-old rolling around in the back seat of a car, you'd probably call Child Protective Services. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying we should order parents to do this because I don't want to get into the whole issue of mandates, but we should have a moral responsibility to protect our children against something that could potentially be life-threatening, particularly when it's spreading across the United States the way it is.
You said there are people like you who can't speak freely. You can speak freely because you're no longer at the FDA.
Correct.
You're saying your former colleagues can't directly answer a question, they can't honestly answer a question and endorse a vaccine right now?
I think it's challenging in this environment for some of them, but you'd have to ask them directly.
Yeah. In your resignation letter, you wrote of the measles outbreak and what happens when confidence in science is undermined. You said it's clear truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. Did you ever speak to him about your concerns?
So just a matter of record, I never interacted with the secretary. I don't intend to engage on disputing any of that. Its administration can have me come and go, that's fine. The more important thing here is that we deal with the issue at hand, which is vaccine confidence is really important for this country, and it's been undermined over and over again over the past years, and now we're seeing the result of this.
You are saying here that the man running HHS doesn't take in information, wishes subservient confirmation of misinformation and lies. There's presumed outcomes, is what you're saying.
I think that my words then spoke for itself. I don't need to belabor it here. Science is the pursuit of objective truth for the benefit of mankind. And those of us who believe in it, we take it very seriously. And it hurts us deeply when there are those who would undercut the name of science, undercut the very name of science because it's convenient for them to purvey lies. And that's just, it's not okay, because at the end of the day, I was so strongly affected by what happened last week with the death of a second child that I actually used profanity with a reporter while I was on the record without realizing it, which is something I've never done. I don't believe that we should be saying, well, these are people who believe that they shouldn't be vaccinated, because my experience, the Mennonite community, my experience is that if you meet people on their level, they generally will eventually come around.
Many parents probably know ASD diagnosis rates are on the increase in this country. The CDC says the current numbers are 1 in 36 American children. This is a very broad spectrum of neurodevelopmental disorders. There's no established cause. On Thursday, the HHS Secretary Kennedy said he's got hundreds of scientists from around the world working on it, and he promised this.
By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic, and we'll be able to eliminate those exposures.
That gives tremendous hope to a lot of people. Do you know anything about that ongoing research?
I know a minimal amount of effort that's going on to try to relook at prior autism research, but I'm not aware of what is being discussed there. I cared for leukemia patients for a significant number of years. Giving people false hope is something you should never do. It is absolutely, you can be incredibly supportive of people, but giving them false hope is wrong. If you just ask me as a scientist, is it possible to get the answer that quickly? I don't see any possible way. And remember, you're talking to the person who came up with Operation Warp Speed for vaccines. Autism is an incredibly complicated issue. So we have the issue of diagnosis bias. We don't know how many of those cases are true, how much of this is true growth of autism, how much of this is just that we now have diagnostic criteria and we diagnose it more often.
The President of the United States said something artificial is causing autism rates to go up. On Thursday, he said, maybe you stop taking something, you stop eating something, or maybe it's a shot. But something's causing it. Right after that, RFK appeared, the HHS Secretary appeared on Fox News and dismissed 14 studies that have shown no link between autism and vaccines. He said it is an epidemic.
Epidemics are not caused by genes. Genes can provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. So we know that it is an environmental toxin that is causing this cataclysm. And we are going to identify it.
Is there scientific evidence ruling out genetics as a cause of ASD?
There's no scientific evidence ruling out genetics. In fact, there's data that have been published that say that genetics may contribute to autism. There are obviously data that suggests that perhaps environmental factors may, but one has to be incredibly careful about making associations between environmental factors and autism. There's a wonderful graphic that shows that Coca-Cola increase goes along with the increase in autism. But there's also a wonderful graphic that you can find online that shows that the increase in spending on organic food also goes along with the rise in autism. False causality. Scientists do not want to find false causality. We want to find true causality.
It stood out to us that Secretary Kennedy has hired someone named David Geyer to conduct analysis of the links between autism and vaccines. He was charged by the state of Maryland in 2011 with practicing medicine without a license. That was weeks after his father's medical license was suspended for putting autistic children at risk by giving them a hormone blocking agent. So, what should the public know or expect from the work that he will do for the US government?
So all I can say is I would not concede. He's, to the best of my knowledge, he's not had any training after college in any of the sciences that we value here. What I think we can expect is the expected, that there will be an association determined between vaccines and autism because it's already been determined. This is not how science is conducted.
You can find our extended interview with Dr. Marks on our YouTube channel or on facethenation.com. We'll be back in a moment. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.